Hey everybody, what's going on? It is Hearthstoner with you again. We have 4 more cards coming out today in the Witchwood season, which is awesome. We weren't expecting new cards until the 26th, so it's great to see a few more. Again, remember here in the introductions of cards, we are only going to do previews and discussion, and we will do ratings at the end of the release season. We don't really want to put ratings on cards that we don't know anything about yet, and without seeing what the rest of the set looks like, because even from last time, there has been massive support released for cards that everybody knew when they first came out were not good, and maybe they're getting better the more cards that we see. So, yeah, before I get into any specific card, all 4 of the cards that I'm showing you today are in line, that said, with the even and odd deck styles. So it looks like Blizzard is really trying to push this archetype, this expansion. I see a few problems with that. The first is that I don't really know if it's going to be effective, but more importantly, I feel like it really limits deck building and different combinations of decks, because there are only like so many strong cards, especially post-rotation, at each increment. So excluding half the pool and then including these cards, which are always going to be in even and odd cost card decks, means that there's not a lot of room for play and not as much as we typically see for there to be different combinations of cards or homebrewed decks, which, always becomes a problem as metas evolve, but I see being a bigger problem here. These are also really going to mess up Arena, because you wouldn't draft these cards in Arena, period. They're all bad for the most part without their condition. So that's something that no one's talking about, especially because Arena already looks a little rough with some of the latest changes. I'll talk about that in a different video. And the last issue I see is that the playability of all of these cards is impacted by the support or the lack thereof. They're garbage without a lot more support. But we might just have that based on the first looks of the expansion. So let's go into it. First off, we have Murkspark Eel. It is a 2-mana, 2/3 Shaman class card with Battle Cry. If your deck has only even cost cards, deal 2 damage. So obviously that's really strong, but we're still looking for a lot of support for Shaman to even have a prayer. This also feels really mid-rangey. Like, a lot of the cards we're seeing seem really mid-rangey, and maybe that means that like, Blizzard recognizes the problem that I said last time, which is that decks are either really strong control decks or they're really strong aggro decks, and it's really hard for mid-range to exist. I think Blizzard is looking to try to make mid-range exist again in the rotation. So yeah, it's going to be really hard to push a new aggro archetype without odd cost cards, especially because most of the aggressive cards in Shaman are rotating. And I also think that Gen, which is the even variant of this card, is almost strictly the weaker of the 2 condition cards, with Baku being better. That said, the ability to throw down 1-cost totems and 2-cost cards that remove the opponent's 1 or 2 drops is pretty good, especially in the Bloodlust class. But it's still just blown out by Hellfire on 4. So we're going to need a lot for this card to make sense. It's also worth noting that the new Shaman hero card that was shown in the preview, the only hero card we're getting, is an 8-drop, so it will fit in with this card, whatever that card is, since Ben Burrow thinks it's too OP. So next up, we have Black Cat. I like this card. It is a 3-mana, 3/3 mage class card with spell damage +1. I love spell damage. And Battle Cry. If your deck has only odd cost cards, draw a card. So in my last video, I said, and I've been saying today, that these archetypes would need support. And this kind of card is looking a lot like that support. Whether this is mid-range again or not, this card is actually enough to fit into control decks, and at this point, a odd-cost Frostless Jaina deck is coming together pretty well already. We'll have room for Arcane Artificer, the natural Ice Block replacement, Secrets, Arcane Intellect, Baku, and Baku actually kind of makes sense in Mage because once you get to Frostlich Jaina, you're pretty cool replacing your hero power, but starting with deal 2 instead of deal 1 is really strong for getting the control to get there. And now you see with that and armor how we have the tools to get to Jaina and outlast. So it looks like Mage is getting a facelift in this next expansion period. What exactly that's going to look like, still hard to be sure, but it's I see an odd cost deck coming together for Mage. After that, there's Glittermoth. It is a 5-mana 4/4 epic priest class card with Battlecry. If your deck has only odd cost cards, double the health of all of your other minions. So it looks like we're trying to find ways for combo priest to reinvent itself. Difficult without Divine Spirit, though. Not really good enough as a mid-range card. Yeah, Divine Spirit is just such a clutch card that not being able to use it and trying to find other ways, it could happen, but it seems difficult. In Wild, this doubles the health of Deathlord while also putting another body down. That's pretty good, but I think that Priest often struggles to maintain control of the board, and I just also think that the Baku Justicar effect isn't really that good in Priest in the first place. Yes, +4 health can be super good for controlling the board, but you have to get the initiative on board in the first place, which Priest typically struggles with, especially against aggro decks. And trying to make a finisher by healing it up is the other use of that +4 health in order to interfire it, and that's good, but getting into that position can be really difficult for Priest. Excluding half the card pool is not going to make that easier. And it's just starting to look like a tough rotation for Anduin. I mean, there's still a lot of cards left to be released, but we know that it's losing a lot of really clutch cards, and everything we're seeing so far for Priest is not looking so good. So the last card for the day is Gloomstag. It is a 5-mana 2/6 Druid class card with Taunt and Battlecry. If your deck has only odd cost cards, gain +2/+2. That is a 5-mana 4/8 with Taunt, which is pretty strong, and could be stronger, I would say. But the thing is that Druid doesn't really want to play the odd cost game. Yes, Druid is keeping a lot of its defensive tools in its rotation. So when I first saw this, I was like super excited about this. I was like, okay, this is the 5-cost card that Druid needs to stay alive to Plague. Like, there's already Mill Druid in Wild, and maybe there's some possibility for this to somehow come around here, or just like the defensive tools are insane. Of course, Jade Idol's rotating, so that would probably be out anyways. But those defensive tools and the best cards Druid has happen to be its even cost cards. I'm thinking cards like Spreading Plague, cards like Swipe, cards like Branching Paths. And I don't see Druid wanting to give those up at all. Yeah, Malfurion is an odd cost card, but that brings us to the issue I talked about earlier in the last video I made, which is that you want to play your Death Knight to replace your hero power, which is strictly better than the one that Baku / Justicar is going to give you. So a 4-mana 4/8 with Taunt is good, but probably too mid-rangey and asking Druid to give up cards that there's just no way that Druid is going to give up. So, yeah, at the end of the day, the only card I think we saw today that is a definite game changer is Black Cat. I think that card will definitely see play. I don't see a reason for Jaina not to make odd cost card decks. I mean, yeah, there's a couple cards in there, but I mean, you get to play Deck of Wonders, and like, why would you play anything other than Deck of Wonders? Especially now that Yogg's gone. I mean, most important cards in the game. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening, and I will be with you as more cards come out, and yeah, more expansion hype. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.